Welcome back. For now, the Keystone XL pipeline is on hold. The Obama administration formally rejected the proposal, but left the door open for TransCanada to reapply, something the company says it plans to do once it determines a route that will avoid the environmentally sensitive sandhills in Nebraska. Stephen Harper said he was profoundly disappointed in the decision. So where does the rejection leave Canada's interests? We thought we'd have our big picture panel weigh in. Bill Robson is president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. Erin Weir is economist with the United Steelworkers Union, and Goldie Hyder is general manager of Hill and Knowlton Strategies. Goldie, we'll start with you in Ottawa. Obviously, the project far from dead. It's certainly on hold. How significant a blow do you think it is to TransCanada and I guess the industry overall?
Well, look, it could be, I say could be, a defining moment in U.S.-Canada trade policy, at least, because I think what it's going to force this government to do, and by this government I mean the Canadian government to do, is to say, you know what, we're dead serious about diversification, and this decision only makes us that much more committed to diversify. For far too long, we've been selling our oil at a reduced price because we're beholden to one market. This may be a blessing in disguise in some ways for Canada. Not that I'm disagreeing with you. I do think the pipeline will get built and this will get past the politics and the policy issues that are there in the United States today. But I do think Canada is going to seize the moment, if you will, and commence the diversification strategy it's currently embarking upon. But we know that involves yet another pipeline dialogue, at least in Canada.
So, gentlemen, as you have a negotiation about whether or not there'll be a pipeline, where it'll go, how much it'll cost, and who's going to get paid what, as you go through that calculus, how much of that will depend on what will happen if there is no decision? In other words, can Canada offload all of its oil production elsewhere in the event that there is no pipeline?
Yeah, do you want to start, Erin?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that the United States is clearly going to continue to be the biggest buyer of Canadian oil for the foreseeable future. So I'm not actually sure how significant this decision is. I mean, it really has more to do with the kind of political tug-of-war between the different branches of American government than any kind of final decision on the pipeline itself. Having said that, I think that Canada can make use of this extra time we've been given to consider some of the important issues surrounding the Keystone proposal. I mean, one issue is the fact that this pipeline would be exporting raw bitumen. And it may well be worth looking at whether it's actually feasible to refine and upgrade more of these resources in Canada.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because obviously there's more than one way to diversify the industry, right? You don't just have to sell more to Asia. We could be doing more of the downstream stuff on our side of the border and selling a higher margin product.
Well, we have the West Coast pipeline, we have Keystone as well. In both cases, of course, it's commercial versus environmental. And in anything that's politically charged like this, you're always going to have a pendulum that swings one way or the other. Where is the pendulum right now? Is it on the side of the environmentalists or is it on the side of the commercialists?
Well, you certainly can't help but think that the environmentalists are kind of thumping their chests over the Keystone decision, though I think in the long run they're not going to carry the day. And I think they're actually misguided to some extent in the sense that how are you ever going to have environmental innovation and technology and the development to address the very issues that they're legitimately raising if it's not through investment, if it's not through the opportunity to build these pipelines, to innovate, to learn, to be creative, and to do the things that need to get done. It's interesting to me that in Canada, at least, the debate we've been having has been about who's trying to influence the process. And I think the government rightfully has been saying, we're on side with this pipeline. We're not prejudging the outcome of the regulator, but we do believe that the pipeline is necessary. I must say I'm very struck by the American decision. I respect the fact that it's a sovereign nation, has the right to those decisions. I think Mitt Romney was very kind when he said that, you know, the president was essentially playing to politics as opposed to policy. I frankly think it makes little sense on either politics or policy. After all, if you're a Democrat, you've got the environmental base, but now you've upset that union base that you also rely on for jobs. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic for how that issue plays out with the Northern Gateway in Canada, because as we know, we now have a very union-friendly opposition here in Canada.
I mean, if I could just raise another issue, I mean, both Bill and Goldie have mentioned the advantage of these pipelines is that they could allow Canada to really get a higher price for its oil and higher margins. But I mean, are we just talking about higher margins for the company, or are we talking about a better return for the public that, after all, owns these resources? And it seems to me that if the rationale for these pipelines is to sell our oil at higher prices, we should be thinking about increasing the provincial royalties to make sure that that benefit doesn't just go into corporate coffers, that it actually goes to the people to whom the resource belongs. Another way of addressing that might be through a higher corporate income tax rate.
We're going to get that back, Erin. I mean, we're going to disagree on perhaps the ideology as to how you get that back. You want royalties. I say create a friendly environment for investment, create jobs, create wealth, and that's the tax base expanding when that happens. And that's how you're going to get the reinvestment in the environment and in the Aboriginal communities and communities in general, in infrastructure. That's where it should come from, not from growing government, but from growing the business and the economy through jobs and wealth creation.
Anybody who's been following the Alberta scene for the last little while and watched the last change on royalties will probably say, don't want to go through that again.
I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, just a second, though. I mean, the issue in Alberta was that they implemented the higher royalties rate at the beginning of 2009 when the world price of oil collapsed. So that's what hurt the industry. It had nothing to do with the change in royalty
The industry
policy.
in BC and Saskatchewan did a whole lot better, so you saw very quickly how people reacted to that.
And let's not forget how volatile that is, right? We're already seeing a decreased demand for some of the very resources that we have. So you can't make policy for the peaks. You got to make it sort of in between the valley and the peak, if you will. So I wouldn't overreact to one situation or the other. I think this government is doing its very best to be prudent in how it handles not just this issue, but the economy in general. And I think it's taking the right approach, which is, create the environment for investment in Canada. That's the best way to grow the economy.
All right, we're going to have to end this one and take a quick break, but coming